Okay, well, we're here. There's so much to talk about here with John Hewlett, the founder and president and owner of Cardio Miracle. But the I got just a taste of it with the conference that Cardio Miracle held and training. But then with that was the culmination of that event was Cardio Miracle sponsoring the VIP section of the Glenn Beck Tucker Carlson event that happened in Salt Lake, and I got to go to that, and my son Sue was out of town, and John, it was just it was incredible. It was incredible. Tell me what's going on.
Oh my gosh, there's so much that's happened, and we don't need to talk a lot about Cardio Miracle. We really won't, because you put it so beautifully the other day. All of the many benefits which we see constantly, and wonderful. Just a shout out to the Palmer Watcher cows customers. They're the best. They're our favorite. We love and appreciate them. So, and we're going to do some interesting things. I've also got a couple of venues lined up for us to do a Palmer reunion,
Oh, great.
a Watcher Cow reunion, either in Las Vegas, St. George, or in Park City. So we got to get our calendars together in our busy schedules and figure that out. But the when I heard about the Tucker Carlson was coming to Salt Lake, I've always liked him. I've always thought he was funny. I liked him at CNN. I liked him when he did Crossfire. I just always liked him. And even though he was kind of preppy and kind of an interesting, I just always loved his sense of humor. And he hones in on people. I mean, he listens. He asks good questions. I personally find, Sean Hannity and I used to find Rush Limbaugh and some of them a little bit annoying because they talked over their guests. They, repeated things over and over, especially Hannity. Even though, I agree philosophically with most of what he says. I always liked Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson was really my favorite of those commentators. So it was really exciting when we had a chance to step up. It was a huge investment. It was the biggest investment I've ever made in anything in this business. And so we became the sponsor. And as a part of that, I when they came back to me, they said, well, we want you to buy more tickets. And I said, hey, we've already bought a lot of tickets.
Kind of maxed out. Yeah.
We're spending a lot of money. But then I said, well, if you'll let us hand out information, and we handed out that wonderful, let me grab it, that wonderful picture to everyone who came in, got one of these in his grasp pictures that, that I gave you and Sue.
Yeah.
From my friend. But this was actually shown in conference. A lot of people maybe remember on Sunday afternoon when they're talking about the Savior and the Atonement, they showed this picture. And then there was another one. I mean, that picture's been in the Liahona and everything else. So everyone who came to that Tucker event ended up going with one of these because this is part of our evangelical bridge that we're doing, which is just really exciting. What's happening with the relationships we're building with our wonderful Christian evangelical brothers and sisters. And so I got involved because when I heard that Tucker was going to be there with Glenn, and not to be redundant, Glenn Beck, I said, whatever it takes, this is our chance, because I really, really, really wanted to expose Tucker to Cardio Miracle and to support him in what he's doing in his new channel. And also I think the world of Glenn Beck. And we started advertising last year. I met Glenn at an event. And so we started on some of his stations, but we couldn't get on his station because he's too busy and he's too big and he's all sold out. So I've been working on trying to figure out how to, for over a year, I've done 3 different things just to meet Glenn and get to know him a little bit, because he's a busy guy and a great guy. And so I think I told you when I helped sponsor the Jason Whitlock, who's a Blaze sponsor, I sponsored that event. Tyler Carden, who's the president of the Blaze, who's Sam Carden, the LDS composer, musician's son, happens to be the son-in-law of my old missionary companion, or the brother-in-law, nephew-in-law of Dennis Crockett, my dear friend. And he introduced me to Tyler Carden, who then introduced me to the team at the Blaze. Then we started sponsoring Jason Whitlock. And so at the Jason Whitlock event in May, I'd had a chance to meet Glenn, and I think we maybe talked about that. And when I was introduced to him, I said, well, I want you to know we have a few things in common, but you need to know a little bit about my church. And he kind of had a quizzical look. And I said, I'm a charismatic evangelical born again member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Glenn Beck looked at me and he threw his arms around me and he said, so am I. So that was my entree to Glenn Beck. So at the event, when we were doing the VIP pictures and stuff, he recognized me and threw his arms around me, and we laughed again about the charismatic evangelical born again. He remembered it, and so we had a chance to get to know him even a little bit better. First time we were exposed to Tucker and met Tucker, but in the second amount of tickets that I bought, which was significant, I told the organizer I wanted my son Jason to be the MC. And he says, oh, we're going to bring in Adam Carolla. Well, I said, you don't want Adam Carolla. Adam Carolla, used to do adult sex comedy. And I mean, he's a funny guy and he's an okay guy and he's a conservative guy. But I said, you don't want him for a Salt Lake audience. I said, I want you to have my son. He goes, hey, I don't, I know how fathers are. And I said, no, listen, I said, I'm prejudiced. He is my son, but he's in the Hall of Fame of the National Speakers. He's one of the top entertainers in America. He just finished 2 weeks at the Hale Theater, blew him away. He gets, 15 to 50,000 a night, depending on what he does. I said, he's world class. He's my son, but he's world class. And so I literally had to make that a part of the deal to get Jason on stage, because Jason also now is operating as kind of our figurehead president of the company, as my potential part of my succession team. And so I wanted that situation, because if we're spending that much money and we're handing out brochures and samples and these references to the Savior and Patriot Mobile, I mean, different things we're doing, I wanted Jason in front of the 9,000-10,000 people, because he's so good that people would remember him. And I thought that would be a good market. So he reluctantly agreed to have him be the MC. And then 3 weeks later in August, he reneged and said, I'll let him be the opener for 15 minutes. And then instead of the MC, he wanted one of the sponsors to be the MC, which, were much more boring than Jason would have been. But it worked out actually better. But it ended up that just before he went out, he says, you've got 13 minutes. So Jason comes out, nobody, in the audience, probably maybe 15% knew who he was in Utah, because he doesn't do a lot of his stuff in Utah. And we had our enthusiastic 150 people, the Cardio Miracle people, who most of them knew who he was. And so he had a good start, but, within 13 minutes, he had taken a cold crowd and had them all standing up singing God Bless the USA with their lights on their phones. And I mean, it was magic. Well, he walks off the stage, and this hardcore manager from Canada who took Bill Clinton on his first tour, and he took General Powell, and I mean, he's taken he took Elton John on tour. I mean, he's a hard-nosed operator, and that's a tough business. He said, where did you come from? He said, this is, he said, I know, he said, I didn't believe your dad, and I didn't want to do this, but he says, we would like to have you every night for the rest of the tour. He said, but Tucker has said that we only want one opener out of the 16 nights. We only want one person to open 3 of the events, and because we want to have different people. Well, they turned around and they had the next event. I think they had just come from Phoenix and Colorado Springs, and the guy in Phoenix was rank, rude, crude, and the sponsors were freaked. They hear Jason, and Jason's clean, he's funny, he's entertaining, you laugh your head off. And so the sponsors immediately after watching him in Salt Lake said, that's our guy. We want that guy. Well, they had another bomb with Megyn Kelly in Kansas City with Tucker that went over like a lead balloon. And they called Jason and said, we want you for the rest of them, because this is a bad start to have these foul-mouthed, racist, ethnic jokesters that aren't very good compared to what he was doing. So long story short, within those two events, all of a sudden Jason was their guy for the whole tour. So we ended up arm wrestling to get him in just to do our event. And so when that happened, then Janet and I cleared our schedule and we hopscotched around the country for the next 10 events for over 2 weeks, going to Wichita and then to Houston, and then from Houston to Grand Rapids, Michigan. From Grand Rapids, they went back to Dallas, which we ended up not going to because we're now in Grand Rapids, and then we're dealing like a day and a day. And the other people all had private aircraft, private jets, and we're trying to piece together our schedule without having it be such a nightmare. And so they go to Dallas and they take Jason to Dallas, and the opener was one of Tucker's friends who was a comedian. And so they had left him in, but they told him he could have 10 minutes. And then Jason was going to take 20 minutes. They kept moving him up, 13 minutes, then 15, then 20, 25. And by the time we were in Jacksonville, the final one, he was at 30 minutes as the opener. It was unbelievable. And they loved it. And it was fantastic. He was a great, great representative of the gospel and of clean humor. I mean, Jason's just a stellar Latter-day Saint. And he's converted to the charismatic evangelical version as well. But during the tour, I got him converted finally. So he goes to Dallas, and this guy does this terribly ethnic, inappropriate, making fun of Hispanics and Blacks and Jews. I mean, it was awful. And all of, the Blaze is in Dallas. Parler, which is going to be the new competitor that we're going to talk about to Facebook, is in Dallas. Patriot Mobile is in Dallas. All these people had their key people there, and they had this horrific opener with this terrible comedian. And one of the ladies had invited some very important people there, and they were all mortified. And she kept saying, "Don't leave, don't leave. Wait till you see the next guy." And then Jason came out, and as he was going to get on the stage, this organizer said to him, "Save our show. You got 25 minutes. Save the show.
Save the show.
Save the show." And so Jason goes out, absolutely knocks it out of the park. Knocks it out of the park. Everyone's happy. He turns around this negative, horrible vibe, turns it around. They're all, standing, cheering, excited. He comes off the stage. The organizer, who's a tough, cold cookie, hugs him. "Thank you for saving the show." And the next thing Jason knows, a guy's coming through the backstage curtain and throwing his arms around him and says, "That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen." And Jason looks at him and says, "You're Glenn Beck." So Glenn Beck's hugging Jason, and he says, "Who are you?" And he goes, "Well, my dad and I are some of your biggest fans. John Hewlett from Cardio Miracle." He goes, "You're John Hewlett's son from Cardio Miracle? Are you kidding me?" So he's hugging Jason. And then he says, "Well, that was unbelievable. I'm so glad I didn't leave." He says, "I almost left during the comedian. It was so offensive." He says, so he leaves after hugging Jason. They have this great picture together and this great communication. And I'm not there. I'm in Grand Rapids trying to figure out how to get to Pennsylvania for the next one. And so Jason calls me literally in tears and said, "Dad, your dream was to get Tucker Carlson and Glenn Beck on Cardio Miracle." He said, "Glenn Beck's hugging me behind the stage." And then his partner came up to me and said, "We're going to start an event company, and we want you to be a part of our tour across America with Glenn Beck." So that was interesting and fascinating. And we had just experience. So in the meantime, Jason is posting, and I won't get into all the details because it's personal. It's his story. He was posting that he was involved with this tour. Well, he's been very, very careful to not offend anyone in his work. So he tries to deal with the woke corporations and the others without compromising his values. His presentation's totally clean. It's called The Promise. It's very spiritually based. It's very much like Stephen Covey for the 2020s and that kind of thing. And then he sings and entertains, makes people laugh. It's clean entertainment. But he had 3 people canceled. him to do $25,000 deals because they said, "Oh, you're doing something with Tucker Carlson. We're not going to honor our deal with you. We're going to back out," before they'd firmed it up. So he was like really in a real dilemma because he spent his whole life not being as controversial as his father to be able to appeal to the rest of the world. And so when we met up with him in Hershey, Pennsylvania, the home of the Hershey Bar, for the event in Hershey, which was, I think Hershey was Robert Kennedy Jr. and Larry Elder, if I remember right, and which was amazing. And then we had Charlie Kirk, and I mean, they had Megyn Kelly, and I mean, it's just, and then Alex Jones, and I mean, and then the last one culminated again with Don. But when we were in Hershey, Jason actually came to my room, and he was like, "Dad," he says, I'm having a hard time." He said, "I've spent 20 years building my career, and I have people now who are painting me as a fanatic when I've never been a fanatic." He says, "And yet I'm listening to these people and I'm hearing things, many of which you've told me, but I've just chosen to stay out of it at this point in time. And because of what I thought I should do for my career." And so we had a long visit, and ultimately had some prayers and blessings and some things. And we had a very profound spiritual epiphany for all of us, Janet, Jason, and I. And Janet's not his mother. I mean, I married Janet 11 years ago, but she loves my children, and they love her. And so we had a very spiritual, tender discussion about the state of our country, that our country's at risk, and that this isn't just a political divide. This is a war between good and evil. Mm-hmm. And he went back and he started listening to these other things. And you should have him on for an interview, and you can talk about it. But he had a strong witness that he needed to stand up and be counted, regardless of the cost, regardless of what it meant to his business, and even with some of his friends, because he's 46 years old, and a lot of his friends are liberal, and they're woke, and they're involved in stuff. And so it's, their friendships were at stake, relationships at stake. I mean, and business was at stake. But as a part of our time together and under the spirit, it was that everything would work out just great, and that he was meant to do this, and that he would have a great experience, and everything would prosper and do well. Well, over the period of that week, he gets invited to be in the #1 speaking group in America, who heard him also perform in Dallas with Glenn Beck and Glenn Beck's partner. And he's the first person from the National Speakers Hall of Fame to ever be invited into the most elite speaking group in the world. The president of the company has invited him to perhaps to manage him to speak all over the world. Tucker's already invited him to go on his next tour in April and May, that he's going to do another one of these. And he says, he did a video. I'll get you a couple of these video clips that you can show your listeners. There's one that's hysterical with Russell Brand, the crazy, wild Russell Brand.
I love that guy.
Have you seen, did I send you the video of him and I? Oh my gosh. It is the funniest thing ever.
I want to see it.
And so Janet's going to send that to you. And then we also have one with Tucker Carlson saying that they had no idea who this Jason Hewlett was, and he's going to be a part of the next tour, and they love him, and how great it was. I mean, it was magical.
A thought came to me, how, so you have Tucker Carlson, who has been very open about his non-spiritual side of his previous life, and somewhat, Protestant raised, but not
Episcopalians.
Episcopalian, the Anglican Church in England, but
Right.
in America, Episcopalian, really not spiritual. He's had a spiritual awakening. Russell Brand, another guy who's come unto Christ and is open, so open about it.
Fanatical.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I was thinking of a couple of others that Sean Ryan, he does a podcast. He got baptized, not LDS, but he got baptized, came unto Christ. Former Navy SEAL, very rough around the edges, great podcaster. He even got to interview Trump here not too long ago. But he's so open about his
conversion.
His conversion. Yeah. Thank you. His love of the Savior, his conversion. And so all these things are happening. And to me, it's not that this good is combating evil. It's not that way. It's always, evil is always below and always trying to combat these awesome, wonderful things that are happening. And so this awakening that's happening among people that are, let's just say it, they're famous. We know them. We know their names. Right. We've seen their history, and they're so open about it now, of their faith in Christ, their conversion. And it's so cool to see Jason now, which I've seen him perform a few times, and you're not just the proud father, it's the truth. This guy is so good. He is so good at entertaining, but making everyone feel uplifted, but also you get to laugh, and we miss that. I mean, we're always talking about crazy things going on, hurricanes and all kinds of things.
Wars all over the world.
Wars all over, and I cover the Middle East, and sometimes you just need to have a good laugh, sense of humor, and look at things a little bit different. And Jason's perfect at that. So this whole thing is just a miracle, and to be able to be around all that, I can't even imagine. I bet it was just
incredible. It was incredible, and because of my jumping in way over my skis, and then Jason delivering. All of a sudden, we were celebrities because of Jason. So yeah. I had to force him as an unknown upon the tour, and then he becomes the key. He's flying around the last 3 stops with Tucker in his jet with the team, and Janet and I are scrambling from flight to flight, trying to figure out how to follow him around. But it was so fun because we connected with literally 10 of the top influencers in the spiritual, patriotic part of the country that I hadn't connected with. And literally in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to Phoenix to meet with the Turning Point USA with Charlie Kirk, meeting with Callie and Casey Means company at True Med that now has Cardio Miracle, folks, because of Scott Palmer, because of the success we've had, is now approved for HSA and FSA tax deductions. You can buy it with those tax deductible dollars. And that's Callie and Casey Means, who wrote the book Good Energy, that have been interviewed on Tucker and other places everywhere. Meeting with them. Then we're headed from there to Kansas City to take Tucker's assistant, who's now Janet's dearest friend, who's a young gal who just fell in love with my Janet, and her and her parents, and help them with their health situations in Kansas City, on our way to New York City, which we're going to New York City to be with Paula Fellingham. Paula Fellingham is the largest women's organization in the world. She's been awarded by 4 presidents, the United Nations, that we're not that crazy about, but she's an LDS temple worker from Saratoga Springs, who's a fabulous woman who just this week has decided that Cardio Miracle is the best product she's ever researched. She's done all the research, and she's on board and wants to become one of our top influencers to help the women globally throughout the whole world. I mean, these things are all just spinning and happening. So we're going to New York. She's going to be on the Today Show and other things like that. So we're going to follow her to New York. And then Janet and I have a week-long retreat, meditation and healing with a bunch of some interesting spiritual people, because people often wonder why I wear my hat all the time. I have a serious skin issue that I've dealt with for a number of years. We've tried everything. I'm trying to always avoid surgery, but we're going to Florida actually to help see if I can solve that. If it was a cardiovascular problem, I wouldn't have a problem, but there's some things that even Cardio Miracle, I think Cardio Miracle's kept it at bay and kept me going, but that's a whole nother story. So we're going to Florida, and then as soon as we are done with that retreat, we're going straight to the Glenn Beck Mercury One, who's probably one of the best charities in the country. We're one of the sponsors of that event. And at that point, then we're going to meet with Patriot Mobile, Parler, which is the new coming Patriot. They're coming back stronger than ever. They're going to replace Facebook, Instagram, all with patriotic people. We're going to help launch all of those types of things. They want to partner with us. Alex Jones wants to partner with us. We're trying to figure out how to navigate that one because he's such a character. But and then, so I mean, that's my next 2 weeks till Halloween. I mean, we're going to be going all over the place. So I'm so excited to have a chance to catch up with you. But and then to see, so Janet, while I'm hobnobbing with all these people, she's toning in, and Kimberly Perkins, who's the head of Moms for America, another Latter-day Saint out of Branson, started this organization out of her kitchen and it had a huge impact throughout the world. But yet, guess what, Scott? Most of Moms for America are evangelicals. They're not Latter-day Saints. And yet she's met with the church. She's met with the people, and they said, well, we'll give you money. She says, no, that would offend all my other people. So if people want to donate and help her cause. But Kimberly Perkins is amazing. They're doing door-to-door canvassing for the elections. They're doing everything possible to fight against. They're fighting for the right to live, by the unborn. They're politically activating moms. She was telling me 70% of LDS women do not vote. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what she said. And she said, we need to vote. Everything is at stake. It's all at risk. And I saw a column yesterday. You probably saw Gordon Monson, who said, it's time that the first presidency tells Latter-day Saints not to vote for Donald Trump. And I'm like, come on, Gordon, are you kidding me? People, and I've written about this, people have not done their historically homework. Almost every president has had moral problems, fidelity problems, lying problems. I mean, we live in a flawed world, and but it's the style that people are so offended by. But let's not talk about, as Tucker calls her, Carmela, how Carmela, kind of has worked her way to the top through various boyfriends, and all of that. And then how on earth anyone could support a platform that says that you can take life up to delivery, and even have suggested for post-birth evaluations if the family and the doctor decide. How can anyone feel that that's a good program? How can anyone feel good about the fact that we've opened up our borders willy-nilly? Janet and I, during this trip, twice were almost in major car accidents in the Uber and Lyft cars we were in. The limousine driver that drove us from Philadelphia, that we engaged to drive us because that was the safest thing to do, said that he can't even drive his limousines in downtown New York City because over half the people don't have car insurance. And there's carjackings and there's problems. So here's a guy and he says, and Philadelphia is almost as bad. And yet we stayed in Philadelphia, and we look out the window of our hotel, and there was the Philadelphia Temple. It was just, it's beautiful. And it's right there in the middle of the center of Philadelphia. So it was really, it was an amazing couple of weeks following our son around, meeting all these interesting people. And the exciting part is all the cameramen, all of the staff people, all of the assistants. I walked in there, it was like Santa Claus, and I'm handing out packets of Cardio Miracle at every place. They go, "Do you have any more? I want to give some to my parents. And do you have any more? I need to take." I mean, it was really fun. So it was great from that standpoint. But the reality is, it really has been a validation. And I'm telling you, I have to say one more thing about it. We were with a fellow who's probably has one of the 3 top pro-life charities in America. And he was a little standoffish with Jason when they were on the private jet together, facing each other, and Tucker and his partner were sitting there, the 4 out of the 12 seats, when he found out Jason was a Latter-day Saint. And and it kind of cooled the conversation. And that was just one late couple of hours. And Jason called me and I said, "Jason, tell him you're a charismatic evangelical member, born again member of the Church of Jesus Christ tomorrow." And he called me up afterwards and he said, "Oh my gosh, Dad." He said, "When I got on the plane, I turned to him and I said, Dan, I didn't clarify. I'm actually a charismatic evangelical born again member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I'm a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And I served 2 years on a mission in Brazil at my own expense." He said, it was like the curtain went down. They had this 2-hour discussion with Tucker listening in, saying that Tucker Carlson had an LDS nanny when he was growing up as a child. And Tucker said to me the first time I met him backstage, he said, "So are you a Mormon?" I said, "Well, I'm a charismatic evangelical, a born again member of the church." And he goes, "What in the world is that?" I said, "Well, it's a more evangelical part of the Latter-day Saint movement." He says, "I love the Mormons. I don't know why people have problems with Mormons." He says, "Everyone I know," he says, "Mike Lee's one of my favorite people. Glenn Beck's one of my," he says, "Everywhere I turn, I'm surrounded by Mormons." He said, "But," he says, "my nanny was a Mormon and she was the nicest young woman I could have ever known as a kid." Now he stands up, he sits there on the stage now, listening to Russell Brand go off on the conversion, listening to Glenn Beck, listening to other people. And he's saying, "I was just a dumb old Episcopalian." And you know, Scott, because you're a student of religion, the Church of England has almost the most spurious reputation of breaking off from the Catholic Church that there is. They come to America, call themselves Episcopalians, which is only, about a half a glass of Cardio Miracle away from being a Unitarian, which means they're not even Christians. So Episcopalians are about as bland and non-committed. There's some lovely people, but it's almost more of a social, political, with throw in a little bit of spiritual stuff. And maybe I'm being unfair, but my experience has been just like when I'm on my mission, when I met people at the Church of England, I don't know that I ever met anyone really devoted. I mean, there's a lot of devoted Catholics, but the Church of England, but Episcopalians. So Tucker's being surrounded by people who are on this spiritual quest. And ironically, this fellow who's over the big end, this guy has raised in the last 10 years, they've prevented 300,000 abortions, 300,000. And yet we often sit by and we don't even talk about it.
I know.
We don't donate. We don't say anything about it. This is murder. This is murder. This is against the plan of our Father in heaven. I have my wife's grandson. I mean, we were surrounded, and you adopted Rita. You have an adopted child that you loved, and they have certain challenges, obviously, in many cases, because of their emotion stuff and things that go on. But there's so many wonderful people that are alive today because the mother made a very, very courageous choice, and that was to give them life instead of taking their life out of convenience. And it's, let me just say for the record, it's highly unfair that young women have to make that horrific choice and decision from having been subjected to a moment of lust or immorality or whatever, moment of passion. And the guys most of the time go off scot-free. They have all the challenge. So I understand the issue, and I understand, but I think the sad part is that in my experience, even though mothers who make the choice to put the baby up for adoption and everything else, and when that turns out, they're thrilled, but they always ache because that was still a child they carried. It's always a little bit of a challenge, and you know that from the experience. But compared to the difficulty people have who make the other choice of dealing with that for a lifetime, I think is really, really a challenge. And so again, I don't know why we don't hear more at conference and our meetings and everything else about being pro-life. I don't understand that. I think that's a mistake. And we as members, if the church isn't going to be more involved in donating and helping with those types of things, like some churches are, then I think as individual members, we have a responsibility to support those. And so that's one of the things that Cardio Miracle is supporting, is a lot of the outreaches of pro-life things that are also charitable and well-run to help these young women that are facing a very, 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 very challenging situation, and helping them, come to Christ and to come to grips with taking care of the child as well, not just selfishly and conveniently getting rid of the problem and then having to deal with the ramifications for the rest of their life.
I would say too that some of the other organizations that that Cardio Miracle's been involved with, and how I got in touch was going to Protocol
7.
Thank you. Sorry, I was going. Was it 9 or 7?
Protocol
7. And then I met your Health Freedom Utah people there.
Yeah.
We had a thing with John Stockton, so that was amazing. And so it's pro-life, make America healthy again. It's let's do whatever we can to avoid war. These are the things that we as Latter-day Saints should just be embracing and really getting involved in any way we can. Everybody has a different, avenue or way they can express that, but these are awesome people too. That's the thing I was so impressed with, just how great these people were at what Cardio Miracle sponsored. I met Judy Mikovich. I met who was the other?
Christiane Northrup.
Dr. Northrup. I met her.
Avery Jackson, the Black neurosurgeon who's a pastor. Half of these people are pastors who are
exactly the guy from California that took on the
Pastor Dave, who
These,
took on Governor Newsom, armed guards, and wouldn't let him shut down his church in Yuba City.
Yeah. So I was surrounded by some of the greatest, nicest, kindest, optimistic, very driven people. And it was just awesome. It was just amazing. Because quite often, not that I'm a news junkie, but I do, try to keep up on things. It can get you down.
There's no question. Think about looking. I mean, and I said this to Janet. I said, we were just in Florida. I mean, we were just there. We are the only Tucker event that was canceled was in Greenville, South Carolina. And I thought, why Greenville? And we barely were able to do Fort Lauderdale right at the same time the hurricane was moving up. We did Fort Lauderdale, and the landing we did get a ride with one of the sponsors from Pennsylvania to Florida, and the landing was pretty hairy. I mean, that wind was blowing hard. That was in Fort Lauderdale, and then the flight to Jacksonville, we had to fly over the ocean, but it was smooth. But Greenville ended up with like 10 inches of flooding, and I mean, earthquakes are bad, fires are terrible. Obviously, everything's gone. flooding is horrific because you have mold, you have construction. I can't even imagine. I have a cousin who lives in Sarasota that was in the eye of the storm. He moved from Salt Lake because he thought it'd be fun to live by the beach and everything, and moved to Florida, and he's really enjoyed it until the last 3 years. 5 major hurricanes in 5 years. He sold all of his rental properties in Salt Lake and bought them in Florida. Went there because partly the sunshine, no winters, and no state income tax. And he said all he's done for the last couple of years is clean up after hurricanes, flooding, rain, tornadoes. And then it's bad enough to have the hurricane and then have the storm surge, which ends up, I never even understood what storm surge was. I mean, you just figured the hurricanes got a lot of rain and wind. Well, the storm surge is like all of a sudden the ocean's 10 feet higher and flooding everything for a mile inland. And then they had 29 tornadoes or something attached.
Exactly.
And let me just say, and call me a conspiracy theorist, but something's going on with our weather.
Oh, for sure. For
Florida's being attacked in a major, major way for a lot of reasons. But right now, property tax in Florida has gone through the moon. Homeowners insurance. People won't even be able to most people won't be able to buy or afford homeowners insurance on anywhere near the coastline. It's unbelievable. I mean, people are paying $20,000 in property tax, $20,000 in homeowners insurance for $1 million house. I mean, or $900,000 house. I mean, it's getting outrageous. It's terrible. So,
man,
and what a terrible thing. Plus, you got to live. You got to make a living. You got to take care of your family. And then I don't know about you, but it takes us a month to try to get an electrician. Can you imagine trying to get somebody to come when everybody around you needs to have the dehumidifiers and dry out your house and tear out your sheetrock and then haul it away and all your trees are blown over? I mean, I'm actually thanking my lucky stars to live in St. George and camp, even though the big fire in Camas was 2 miles, 5 miles over the ridge from our family ranch. And so, that's the closest we've had to that. But my goodness, when you think of what they've gone through in Florida, and then these border states, and then these big cities having this migration, unbelievable immigration issues and crime and everything else. Anyone who doesn't think these are the last days is missing the boat. They're not looking at the calendar and looking at what's going on.
The signs are there, and we just need to be watching and do everything we can to prepare in a spiritual sense and in a temporal sense. They go hand in hand. I've talked about this so many times on my channel that it's hard. You can't really separate the two. And if you do, you're going to be lacking on both, because they're so connected. And I'll tell you, we have a good supply of Cardio Miracle in our food storage.
It's the best. I mean,
I had somebody reach out the other day and say, "Hey, how can I get some? I'm leaving like in a day or two to Paris, and I ran out." And I didn't know what to tell them because I responded. We actually now have our own warehouse, and it has the ability to have a store. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, just opened at the beginning of the month also. And so it's on 85th South and like 29th West. It's right across from for people in Salt Lake, it's right across from the Dunford Bakery.
Yeah.
Major bakery. It's right across the driveway from that. So I'll get you the address. I posted it. I should know it, but I've only been there a few times. But
yeah, if you could get that to me, we'll post it on the video.
Yeah.
And then if people if they're in the Utah area, they can get it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, anything else, Brother John? Anything else we want to talk about?
Okay. It's 8575 South, 8575 South, 2940 West, Unit B, West Jordan, Utah. West Jordan.
Okay.
So I'll send you this.
Okay, perfect. And then we'll.
So the last thing, Scott.
Yeah.
Finish on a high note. I was with my dear friends Dennis and Terry Crockett he's much nicer, more conservative, not more conservative. He's more religious than I am. I helped train him in the mission field. And so he's always he's listened to me, even though he's been a stake presidency, mission president. He was an IFR. Tell him what an IFR is. He was an IFR, which is like.
When we presided over a mission, our IFR was Steve McConkey, Bruce R. McConkey's son. And they take a big, they'll have maybe 20 missions that they're, I shouldn't say over, but they handle the issues, the big problems.
The intermediary, right.
Yeah, the mission presidents would have were 20 missions or thereabouts. And so they're getting inundated when a mission president has a real particular issue with, and it's usually with a young missionary, something's happened, something's gone on. It could be car accidents, health issues, moral issues, whatever. Then you call your IFR, which I can't remember. I used to remember what that stood for, and then they have to deal with that. So Brother Crockett, did you say?
Yeah, Dennis was the IFR in the Philippines, and I think
goodness, I can't even imagine.
I think he had 40 missions talking to him. I said, well, how did that go compared to being a mission president? He said, mission president was a piece of cake compared to that. He says the IFR. I mean, you're getting calls from somebody saying, I'm in Singapore. And we got a couple of missionaries that are vacationing in the Philippines. What should I do? It's that kind of crazy stuff that the IFRs have to deal with. I remember when I talked to recently returned mission president, Peter Vidmar, the one who won the silver medal. Mm-hmm. He was actually mission president in Australia, and I ran into him a couple of years through a mutual friend. And I said, oh, you were in my mission. He says, yeah. And he actually formed a stake in an area where I baptized the first people.
Oh, man.
50 years before. And so that was kind of exciting. And at the stake conference, I had two people that I had baptized in my mission in 1970, one in Melbourne and one out in the country 4 hours away. And they were sitting next to each other in the stake conference in this little town that had one family members, and then we baptized a couple of people. They were sitting by each other in the stake conference, and they were chatting with each other. They didn't know each other. They're from different parts of the stake that covered about, that stake covered like 200 miles.
Right.
And they said, well, when did you join the church? Says, 1970s. Oh, yeah, right, yeah. That's great. When did you? Well, I joined in 1972. That's great. In the 1970s. Says, well, who baptized you? That a guy, John Hewlett, Elder Hewlett. Goes, Elder Hewlett baptized me too. So this young girl that we baptized in Melbourne was 18, and she had ended up staying active and becoming a really excited president, sending kids on mission. And then the 12-year-old son of a non-member father, we baptized him, and he ended up having been the district president and everything else. They were sitting by each other 50 years later in a stake conference in a little community where the stake center was going to be. So that, it's just so exciting to have those. But back to Peter Vidmar, I said, so what was it like to be a mission president? He said, well, picture yourself putting 180 teenagers in the back of a minivan and driving around in circles for 3 years. He said, that's what it was like being a mission president. I said, yeah,
that's about right.
I said, that's it. So last night, when I had our friends, the Crockett's here, we baptized this amazing couple. He was the district leader. I was the zone leader. Our companions were kind of flaky. And so we would go and work and leave our companions to do whatever they did. And one night, and I don't know if I've told you this story, one night we were looking at a referral, Elder Crockett and I, and we knocked on the door of a student college dormitory or apartments, and we knocked on the door, and this handsome young New Zealander, this is when I was in New Zealand, that was for the last half of my mission, this handsome guy answered, and we asked if he knew where this person was, and he said he didn't. And we said, well, thank you very much. And it was 9:15, and the rules say John Hewlett didn't follow the rules much, but the home at 9 o'clock, and it was 9:15, and so we turned and said thank you, and we drove down the street. As we're driving down the street, the Spirit said, like as strong as I've ever had, go back and talk to that guy. We turned, I stopped, and Elder Crockett looked at me and said, what are we doing? And I said, we're going to go back and talk to that guy. He says, it's 9:15. He said, I said, we got to go talk to that guy. So we went back, knocked on the door, and he answered the door. He goes, oh, it's you again. And we said, we'd like to come talk to you about our church. He goes, well, I'm an atheist, and I grew up in the Church of England, speaking of the Church of England.
Yeah.
And he said, but I love Americans, and why don't you come back? Come back on Tuesday. And we said, okay. We went back and taught them. They were as poor as church mice. They were the managers of the apartment. They had like 2 folding chairs and a card table, a couple of pillows to sit on the floor in this unfurnished 1-bedroom apartment. And we taught him the first discussion. And he goes, that's the most amazing story I've ever heard. So he left him the pamphlet, left him the Book of Mormon, set up an appointment for 3 days later. We came back. He had read all the way to Alma already in the Book of Mormon. He goes, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And his wife was they both viewed themselves as agnostic or atheists. And they were college students finishing their last certification as school teachers. And in 2 weeks, we ended up taking them to church. Well, the church was in the Red Cross Hall in Papakura, New Zealand, with the cigarette butts and the beer bottles and everything from the night before, so elders would have to clean it up. It was all Polynesian, no white faces. These were 2 European 2nd-generation New Zealanders, white Caucasian New Zealanders, in an all Polynesian crazy ward in the Red Cross Center. We're there. The kids are screaming, crying, and rubbing their runny noses on each other, chasing each other. And Elder Crockett and I are sitting there just sweating bullets, saying, oh, this is going to be a disaster. At the end of the meeting, they go, I think we could really help here. And we're like, man, we can't screw this thing up. These are the most golden people we've ever met. Long story short, 3.5 weeks later, we baptized both of them. A year and a half later, he was put in this first bishopric. 3 years, he was a bishop. A couple years after that, he was council of stake presidency. A couple years after that, he was the stake president in Gisborne, New Zealand, has served several missions, raised his entire family in the church, pillar, both. So Elder Crockett and I, over the last 50 years, I mean, he's been this couple, Peter and Frances Burt, have been like the crowning jewel of our missionary service. And his darling wife, they just finished another mission in the Philippines. And he moved to Lake Taupo, which is the best fly fishing, the best fishing in New Zealand. And he and his wife moved there, and they called him to be the patriarch of the Lake Taupo stake area. And his wife just passed away 2 weeks ago, kind of suddenly. And so we FaceTimed them last night together, and we're talking to him about that. And I mean, how sweet is it to be that these people for us to have been so fortunate to have been the ones to find these people under the strangest of circumstances, that we were looking for someone else. We're driving down the road, and literally the Spirit says, go back. And then 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, and he's now a patriarch, and talking to him, and he's suffering because he said, 55 years of marriage, and my companion's gone. And he said, and I said, how many blessings do you give? He says, 6 or 7 a month. He says, it's a wonderful, wonderful calling. But so I just wanted to say that, the Lord knows who he wants to be a part of the latter-day work. Our job is to stand up and be counted. I'm so proud of Jason and Janet. I mean, Janet was unbelievable. She was connecting with these people, and literally within 5 minutes, she's talking to them about the gospel. She's talking to them about the life after this life, and her losing her son, her handicapped son, and how she knows that she senses his spirit with her, and all of these types of things. And we just had one spiritual miracle after another in the midst of being in the middle of the world and all of this political anchor and angst, and yet the light keeps penetrating through if we do our very, very best to follow those feelings and open those doors. And so I said to my Temple Sealer, very, very mainstream Latter-day Saint, former missionary companion, dear friend over these years, that I need him to join my charismatic evangelical born again movement. And he goes, I'm in. And I said, well, I told Janet, I said, hey, if he's in, then that's okay. We're good.
Yeah.
We're on the right path.
We're good.
Because
We're good.
They're totally, this as great a people as possible. So they're in the Ochre Temple on Wednesdays. If anyone goes to baptistry, you can meet Sister Crockett. He's a sealer in that temple, and the greatest people in the world. And I finally got him on Cardio Miracle a year ago, and it's made a huge difference in his health and life as well. So thanks for all you do, Scott. We love Sue. We love the people. We're so glad that we were able to get some of the people tickets for the event.
Yes.
That we were able to have some that were able to come. I hope they all had a great experience. I hope that all of them, we have less than 30 days to Election Day. Everyone needs to stand up and be counted, and we need to give ourselves a chance to delay the wickedness a few more years, because if things aren't successful, it's going to get really ugly fast. And it's going to get ugly anyway, but it's all fulfillment of prophecy. So just so that, as for us in our own home and our own relationships, we just need to be prepared. And we need to be constantly feeding the fire. And it's been so phenomenal, because the first person I used this charismatic evangelical born again on was Pastor Jim Ryan, the mile runner, that broke the world's record.
Yeah.
Jim Ryan came to the Jacksonville event. His wife came to the Jacksonville event. They hugged us. We have this wonderful spiritual relationship. And the first night when I was sitting on our cruise talking to them, and he kind of had that very defensive LDS thing, he's the one that I had this downloaded thought, inspiration. I said, take away the adjectives. Tell him that I'm on his side of the team. I'm on his side of the Savior, the charismatic, the evangelical, the born again. And that has cemented us as the dearest friends. And they're not ready to be baptized into our church, but they view it totally differently, because they can have a normal relationship. And I so much salute, our friend Dave Bryan at Yuba City. He wants us to come out there. In fact, I'll fill you in. I think he wants us to come out at the end of the month. So maybe we'll fly down and have you guys come with us, because he wanted you to preach in his church along with me. So that'd be kind of fun. So.
Yeah, this has been such a good catching up of all the things going on in your life. But I love ending with these missionary stories. It's the heart and soul of the gospel.
Changed my life.
Yeah.
Changed my life. And I frankly have a darn hard time with anyone who had, that worked hard, studied hard, and connected well with the people they serve with. I have a hard time thinking they could ever not have a testimony of the gospel. I had so many experiences on my mission that I could endure almost anything because of those experiences. And that's the key, not the logic, not the intellectual side. It's those spiritual miracles and understandings we have. We have so much understanding that we take so much for granted. And yes, there are problems. Yes, there are challenges. Yes, there are things we don't always agree with or whatever. But the basic restoration and I just got the Penguin Books edition of the Book of Mormon. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's phenomenal. It was in one of the hotel rooms at the Marriott, and it reads like the original translation as a story, like a novel. I read the first couple of books of Nephi, and how can anyone
I know.
anyone think that a guy could make this up? It's beyond me. So
Yeah.
so grateful and appreciate your great spirit and love your folks. And we've just had a great several years. I guess we're on 3 years, I think, Scott, and it's been unbelievable.
It's been a great journey so far. Looking forward to more of this. So love you, John.
All right, take
care.
care.
Hi to Janet, and we'll talk soon after your world travels here in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, see you later.
Okay, see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.